On the 52nd floor of the State Street Financial Center, Melanie Wilson sighed as she gazed at the twilight Boston skyline through the large glass windows. Her desk was piled high with investment analysis reports, and 20 unread emails were waiting for her attention. Ms. Wilson, about the Anderson family's asset allocation review. Her colleague Michael began, but Melanie's smartphone interrupted their conversation. "I'm sorry, it's my sister," she said. The screen displayed incoming call from Ashley. This was the third time today. Melanie let out a deep sigh before answering. "Sis, are you free? I found the most adorable dress. It's perfect for Instagram." Ashley's voice bubbled with excitement. "I'm at work right now. Please. I absolutely need this. My followers are growing, and for new content." Melanie closed her eyes and pressed her temples. "All right. What's the budget?" "Just $3,000. That's a steal, right?" Melanie frowned but silently shared her credit card information. Her parents' mortgage payments, Ashley's startup funds, and monthly living expense subsidies, the numbers in her household ledger flashed through her mind. That evening, at the family dinner at her parents' home. "Melanie, look." Ashley twirled in her new dress. It already got 500 likes on Instagram. "That's wonderful, Ashley. Your dedication to pursuing your dreams is admirable," Carol, their mother, said proudly. "Our daughter really has a talent for social media," Robert, their father, added boastfully. Melanie continued eating in silence. On the table was their mother's home cooking. Like every Sunday night, family conversations continued. Ashley's latest travel plans, her Instagram success stories, and then, "By the way, how are the wedding preparations with James going?" Her mother suddenly changed the subject. Melanie's expression brightened. "Wonderful. We've secured the Fairmont Copley Plaza." "Oh my." Her mother clapped her hands. "That's the finest hotel in Boston." James's parents arranged the venue. "A typical Morrison family choice," her father remarked, tilting his glass. "That medical equipment manufacturer." "Dad," Melanie quietly intervened. "James and we don't care about such things." "But isn't it important?" her father persisted. "Social status." "Hey, Melanie," Ashley changed the subject. "Can I do an Instagram live during the wedding?" Melanie set down her fork and exhaled slowly. Outside the window, spring breeze scattered cherry blossom petals. "Let me think about it." As she was leaving, her mother embraced her at the entrance. "You're such a good girl," her mother said with tears in her eyes. "Always putting family first." Melanie nodded silently. Sitting in her car, she gazed at her parents' house lights in the rearview mirror. In them, she saw the reflection of herself who had supported her family for 10 years. Late that night, a message arrived from James. "Working late again?" "No, I was at my parents'. Family time is important. How about dinner with my parents this Sunday?" Melanie smiled. Meeting James had felt like destiny. Their chance encounter at a charity event. His gentle smile. His sincere character. And above all, his capacity to accept all of who she was. Looking at the wedding venue photos on her screen, Melanie dreamed of their happy future. On her wedding day, morning sunlight streamed into the bridal suite at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. "Perfect," Linda, the makeup artist, said while adding final touches. "You're truly a beautiful bride." Melanie gazed at her reflection in the mirror. Her Vera Wang wedding dress sparkled in the morning light. The delicate lace embroidery at the neckline, the train flowing elegantly down her back. Everything felt like a dream. "It suits you perfectly, miss," the dress designer said while carefully arranging the train. "The Morrisons will surely be delighted." "Thank you," Melanie smiled softly. There was a knock at the door, and Elizabeth, James's mother, entered. "Melanie, you." Elizabeth's voice caught, tears welling in her eyes. "You're absolutely beautiful." "Elizabeth, thank you." Melanie embraced her soon-to-be mother-in-law. In Elizabeth's hands was a pearl necklace passed down through generations. A traditional piece worn by Morrison brides throughout the years. "From my mother, and her mother before her, passed down through generations," Elizabeth said as she fastened the necklace around Melanie's neck. "From today, you're a member of the Morrison family. This necklace is proof of that." Just then, Melanie's smartphone vibrated. 9 o'clock. Time for her parents and sister to arrive. "Your mother isn't here yet?" Elizabeth asked, looking out the window. "They should be here soon," Melanie noticed her voice trembling slightly. 15 minutes passed, then 30. "Melanie, why don't you try calling your mother?" Elizabeth gently suggested. Melanie picked up her phone and dialed her mother's number. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. "Hello, Mom?" A moment of silence. Then, the sound of waves. "Oh, Melanie? Was the wedding today?" Her mother's voice came from somewhere far away. Someone was laughing in the background. "We're in Hawaii. Ashley found this wonderful resort. The Breakers. It's absolutely amazing." Something shattered inside Melanie's mind. "Sis." Ashley's voice called from a distance. "Thanks for the miles. This is going to be such a wonderful vacation. I'll send you pictures." The air in the bridal suite froze. Elizabeth's sharp intake of breath was audible. The makeup artist and dress designer quietly slipped out of the room. "I see," Melanie's voice was surprisingly calm. "Have fun." After hanging up, the room fell into complete silence. Elizabeth approached and placed a hand on Melanie's shoulder. "I'm fine." Melanie stood up slowly. "Let's begin the ceremony." At that moment, James entered the room. Though it's considered bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding, such traditions hardly mattered anymore. "I heard," James embraced Melanie. "I support whatever decision you make." Melanie took a deep breath in and out. She gazed at her reflection in the mirror. The pearl necklace gleamed in the morning light. "Let's begin the ceremony," she repeated. 300 guests are waiting. In the grand ballroom, a string quartet from the Boston Symphony Orchestra was playing Bach's Air on the G string. 300 guests waited in a solemn atmosphere. Massive vases reaching to the ceiling held pure white Casablanca lilies arranged by Winston flowers, and crystal chandeliers cast soft light from the 20-foot ceiling. William Morrison, James's father, quietly approached Melanie. "May I escort you down the aisle in your father's place?" Melanie nodded silently. Anger flickered in William's eyes, but it wasn't directed at her. As she took her first step onto the aisle, Melanie steeled her resolve. This was the beginning of a new life. She wouldn't look back. Mendelssohn's Wedding March began to play. 300 pairs of eyes turned to the bride in pure white. Not a single tear could be seen in her eyes. James waited at the altar. Beside him stood his best friend Michael as best man. On the opposite side, Melanie's best friend Sarah wore a lonely expression. "Dearly beloved," the minister's voice resonated through the grand ballroom. "We are gathered here today before God." The ceremony proceeded solemnly yet warmly. They exchanged vows, exchanged rings, and then, "I now pronounce Melanie Wilson and James Morrison husband and wife." Applause erupted. But missing from it were the voices of family that should have been there. At the reception, friends of the Morrison family offered toasts one after another. Fellow doctors, charitable organization colleagues, childhood friends. And finally, Elizabeth stood up. "Today, we welcomed a new member to our family." Her voice carried strong conviction. "Melanie, from today you are a precious member of the Morrison family. We deeply respect your strength and dignity." As the night wore on and the party drew to a close, James whispered while escorting Melanie for the last dance. "You were an amazing bride today. I'm proud of you." Melanie buried her face in her husband's chest. Now, for the first time, tears were flowing from her eyes. From the window of their Back Bay high-rise condominium, they could see the sun setting over the Charles River. Melanie stared at the smartphone in her hand. The screen showed over 50 missed calls. All from her family. "Better not look at those," James said, offering her a wine glass. The living room of their new home was still filled with unopened wedding gifts. Presents from the Morrison family's friends. Each one reflected a level of sophistication different from the environment Melanie had grown up in. "Why?" Melanie murmured, staring at her reflection in the window. "Why did they use my miles?" "Your decision was right," James said quietly. "But I want you to know this is just the beginning." It didn't take long to understand the meaning of those words. The next day, an email arrived at Melanie's office. It was from the Boston Children's Hospital Board of Trustees. A notice of removal from the Charitable Activities Committee. Influential figures in the real estate industry began canceling deals with Robert Wilson's company one after another. The following day, the Boston Globe published a small article. And then, a notice from the credit card company revealed everything. Report on fraudulent mileage acquisition. With trembling hands, Melanie read through the documents. Approximately 5 million miles over the past 2 years. The evidence clearly showed how Ashley had colluded with mileage brokers to fraudulently obtain them. And her parents had known and silently approved. Why didn't I notice? Melanie held her head in her hands. You believed in them, Elizabeth consoled her. That's never wrong. However, the situation continued to worsen. The dissolution of real estate deals dealt a fatal blow to her father's company. The Morrison family's influence was deeply rooted in Boston's high society. On social media, rumors spread about the family's absence from the wedding. Ashley's followers decreased daily, and sponsor contracts were terminated one after another. They brought this on themselves, William expressed his anger. They're reaping what they sowed. But the most shocking development came that weekend. A phone call from Hawaii. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson have been in an accident, the resort staff reported. They're currently in intensive care. The color drained from Melanie's face. Insurance. I'm sorry. It seems their medical insurance is unavailable. It was the Morrison family's final display of influence. Her parents' medical insurance contracts had been suddenly terminated. What should I do? For the first time, Melanie's voice shook. We'll support you with everything we have, Elizabeth said firmly. But not for them. This decision is for you. The night view spread out from their new home's living room. Boston's lights twinkled across the Charles River. Melanie pressed her forehead against the window, touching the cold glass. Her smartphone rang again. This time from an unknown number. Hello, Ms. Wilson, a stern voice resonated. This is the legal department of the credit card company. We need to discuss the fraudulent use of miles in the intensive care unit of the Breakers Resort. In the corridor filled with the smell of disinfectant, Melanie listened to the attending physician's words. The situation is quite serious, the doctor continued. Your father, in particular, will need head surgery. The issue is the cost, right? Melanie said quietly. Yes. Roughly $800,000. Without insurance coverage. Next to her, James drew in a sharp breath. Outside the window, Hawaii's gentle waves rolled in. The scene now felt strangely unnatural. I'll pay, Melanie answered immediately. Melanie, James grabbed her arm in protest. This is my decision. Beyond the hospital room door, her parents lay unconscious. The steady beep of monitoring equipment marked time mechanically. Ashley sat huddled in a corner of the corridor, covering her tear-stained face with both hands. That afternoon, another shock hit Boston's real estate industry. Wilson Real Estate to conduct emergency sale of all properties. Melanie invested all her severance pay and savings. But it wasn't enough. She put her condominium up for sale and liquidated all her investment stocks. Still not enough. What should I do? For the first time, her voice trembled. Just then, an alarm sounded from the hospital room. Code Blue, a nurse's voice echoed through the corridor. As the medical team rushed into the room, Melanie could only stand there. The clock hands moved forward with cruel slowness. Your father is out of immediate danger, the doctor announced with a tired expression. However, to continue treatment. That night, an important meeting was held at the Morrison family mansion in Boston. Melanie, William began quietly. I understand your decision. But this isn't something you can decide based on emotion. Yes, they are your parents, Elizabeth continued. But they betrayed you. And now they're paying the price for that. I still have options. No, Elizabeth interrupted. Enough. You don't need to sacrifice anymore. Just then, Melanie's smartphone rang. A notification from the Boston District Attorney's Office. A criminal indictment had arrived regarding the fraudulent use of miles. This is. Melanie stared at the screen, at a loss for words. The indictment listed Ashley's name. And surprisingly, her parents' names too. They had conspired together. The next morning's Boston Globe headlines. Prominent real estate family indicted for fraudulent mileage acquisition. Social media influencer allegedly conspired with parents in their 50s. Morrison family-related companies announce complete halt of transactions. At church, Robert and Carol's names were quietly removed from the prayer list. In the real estate industry, business partners continued to submit contract terminations. Ashley's Instagram followers plummeted overnight to just a few hundred. Sponsor companies began sending notices of damage claims. "Nobody likes my posts anymore," Ashley sobbed in the hospital corridor. "It feels like my life is over." Meanwhile in Boston, her father's company had come to a complete standstill. Employees resigned en masse, leaving the office a ghost town. Melanie, her mother, called weakly from the hospital bed. "We're finished, aren't we?" Outside the window, Hawaii's sunlight shone brightly. The light seemed to ironically illuminate the situation more cruelly. "We need to find a new home," her father said in a hoarse voice. "We can't return to Boston." Melanie silently gazed out the window. Memories of childhood spent by the Charles River. Sunday dinners at their Newton home. Everything now felt like a distant past. "We've decided to move to another state," her mother announced. "In this city." As her words trailed off, Melanie's cell phone rang again. This time, news that the mileage broker had agreed to fully cooperate with prosecutors. The truth was about to be completely revealed. "Melanie," James quietly placed his hand on her shoulder. "That's enough. Let's start our life." 3 months later in Boston. Melanie gazed at the autumn-tinged cityscape from the window of her new office at the hospital. "Melanie, it's time for the board meeting," Elizabeth called gently. The new pediatric medical center establishment project at Boston Children's Hospital. Melanie now spent her days as a core member, drawing on her investment banking experience to handle everything from fundraising to operational planning. "Thank you, Elizabeth." In the corridor heading to the conference room, a newspaper article caught her eye. Former social media influencer receives prison sentence for fraudulent mileage acquisition. Parents receive suspended sentences as co-conspirators. In the article, Ashley was photographed leaving the courthouse wearing dark sunglasses. No trace remained of her former glamorous appearance. "Don't worry about it," Elizabeth said quietly. "Your life is in a different place now." At the board meeting, they discussed plans for the new medical center. A state-of-the-art medical facility for sick children and their families. This had been James's long-held dream. "We extend our deepest gratitude to all our donors," William concluded his remarks. Melanie smiled secretly. The Morrison family's influence had now become her ally. That evening, when she returned home, a letter had arrived. The return address was Phoenix, Arizona. It was from her mother. "To my beloved daughter. I still don't know how to properly apologize to you. We betrayed you at your wedding that day, and trampled on years of trust. This is a regret that will never fade. We're now living in a small apartment in Phoenix. Your father has started working as a clerk at a local real estate company. We've lost all our former dignity and pride, but perhaps this is the price we must pay. Ashley is participating in a rehabilitation program in prison. She's struggling with life without social media, but perhaps this time is necessary for her life too. Your wedding day. That day, we made an unforgivable mistake. On the most important day of our daughter's life, we indulged in our own desires. There are no excuses. But please, let me say just this one last thing. You have grown into an even finer adult than we ever hoped for. We hear you're walking a new path as a member of the Morrison family. We're truly glad. We won't interfere with your life ever again. This will probably be my last letter. Goodbye. And I'm sorry. Love, Mom. A single tear rolled down Melanie's cheek as she finished reading the letter. You don't have to read it, James's voice came from behind. I thought I should, Melanie said with a smile. Now I can truly put it all behind me. That night, dinner was held at the Morrison mansion. Elizabeth's favorite bone china was set on the table. William quietly poured wine, and everyone raised their glasses. To the success of the new pediatric medical center, William said. And to our precious family, Elizabeth added. Melanie touched the pearl necklace at her throat. The Morrison family symbol she had inherited from Elizabeth on her wedding day. Now it rested with a sure weight in her heart. The next morning, Melanie and James went for an early morning jog. As they ran along the Charles River walkway, they talked about new dreams. I want to build a family house next to the pediatric medical center, James shared. A facility for children coming from far away for treatment and their families. That's a wonderful idea, Melanie smiled genuinely. As the morning sun turned the river's surface golden, they continued running. This was the beginning of a new life. No looking back. Moving forward, one step at a time, with sure footing. That afternoon, Melanie met a little girl at the hospital. As part of a support program for children facing difficult surgeries and their families, she regularly met with patients. I'm scared, the little girl said in a small voice. It's okay, Melanie gently held her hand. You have family with you. But trust in that, Melanie smiled. True family will always be by your side. Outside the window, autumn twilight was settling over Boston. Like heralding the start of a new season, a single leaf danced in the wind, quietly settling onto the earth. It seemed to softly announce the beginning of a new story.